I very much appreciate you taking my testimony this morning. I also wish to acknowledge that this is taking place on traditional territory, the Tsimshian Nation, and that I was honored to be asked to walk in with that nation this morning. I think it does this panel honor. I think it does the entire process a level of respect that is actually quite indicative of how we in the Northwest like to treat visitors, with respect and understanding and an open heart. I think in the best tradition of Justice Berger, this panel is attempting to establish a balance between traditional knowledge, rights and title, and the laws of this land. And the importance of hearing oral testimony and oral evidence and giving it the weight and circumstance that we do to technical briefings and to other sources that upon which you will make your decision. And let me say that I have no envy for you in the chairs that you are in. This is an incredibly complicated matter. It weaves together many of the most fundamental factors and decisions that exist within any nation, and potentially has an impact on many people, both here in the Northwest of British Columbia, but right across Canada, and perhaps around the world. I see that my testimony here today is certainly on my behalf as an independent Canadian citizen, as a resident of the Northwest, but also on behalf of many people who either can't speak or are intimidated by the process to be here, who have relayed many of their concerns and thoughts and hopes through me to you. This is about telling our story. This proposal of a pipeline and the supertankers that are connected to it asks us to ask questions of ourselves as a people, as a region, and as a country. And I believe fundamentally, if I attempt to summarize where the concerns lay, it is a question of trust. First and foremost is trust of this particular company. They are the one making the proposal through you to the Canadian government and through you to the people that I represent here in the Northwest. Can the company be trusted? Has the company's record in the past shown it to be worthy of trust? I think this is also a technical question, although I will refer away from the technical aspects of trust of pipelines themselves and of the capacity to keep them safe and of the tankers that are associated to this project in the particular area that we're talking about, and can we trust that that will also be safe? In some ways, this very process is the third area of trust. Can the people that I represent trust what's happening here? Is it, as you said in your introduction, Chairwoman, and I think it's accurate, as established as an independent arm of government? Is it free in the way that we have designed it to come to a decision, and is that decision going to be respected? That is a question that many of the people that I represent, that is a question that I ask. And lastly, and perhaps most fundamentally, the question of trust of the federal government, the government of Canada, to honor the commitments that they make in law and by statute that will be actually adhered to. And I think as we watch the current government in action, there is a certain amount of mistrust over the particular issue of energy and over the particular industry of oil, that many of my constituents feel that there is not a level playing field in the conversation. My first personal interaction with the company, let's have some emails and some telephone calls, was a meeting that was held in Vancouver, talking about how the company would interact with my community and what the effects would be of that interaction. And the first thing that the company wanted me to know was that they had been able to successfully raise $100 million in the effort to promote this project. $100 million that was received in $10 million allotments that was from undeclared sources. I asked who is behind that, and they neglected to reveal that, which is fine. Since that meeting a number of years ago, we do know now who some of those companies are. The reason this is relevant is that we have been unable to encounter any project in Canadian or US history that has had that type of money and support behind just the promotion and engagement of citizens. It's an extraordinary amount of money, and that money bears influence, and it can't be ignored. I now turn to my experience with the Gitxsan Nation.
Excuse me, Madam Chair, if I may interrupt. My name is Laura Estep. I'm counsel for Northern Gateway. We would like to express an objection to this presentation. We believe that it is it is argumentative, it is a political agenda. This is nothing more than a political speech, and we object on that basis. Mr. Cullen has been directed on numerous occasions in writing and otherwise by the panel as to what constitutes appropriate oral evidence. We've been listening this morning and have yet to hear that. I don't think it's appropriate to continue waiting for something appropriate to be provided in terms of oral evidence. It's not oral evidence what he's been giving so far.
Excuse me, order in the room. Thank you very much. This is a serious proceeding, and we need to be able to have it unfold in a way that shows the kind of respect that we've all gathered here to be a part of. So I'd ask the audience to please refrain from verbally expressing or by hand clapping or anything like that your perspectives. Mr. Cullen, any comments in reply?
I'm surprised it took 10 minutes. I think that in my personal experiences, particularly in dealing with the elders and hereditary chiefs of the Gitxsan, the project has been to this point, in the attempt to sign a negotiated agreement to enable the project, the impact has been incredibly negative on the people within that nation. I appreciate the panel's comment. I was going to impugn that on the question of credibility. If the company has none, I won't approach it in my testimony. The history of the land is implicitly connected to the people who live here. The history of the land, the traditional knowledge that has been accumulated of this land. We have an expression here that says, the land makes the people don't make the land. And these are emotional and powerful issues for people, and it's tough to tell folks in the north to restrain themselves emotionally sometimes. We are a passionate people, particularly when it comes to the land. The history of this land is connected to the people. The stewards of this land have been the First Nations people for millennia. The impact that I have seen to this point on the stewards of the land, by even just the proposal of this project, has been to sow discord and a great division within some of the communities that I represent. This is at a very personal level. You ask for personal stories in which elders have felt that expressing their opinions one way or the other on a project has exposed them to abuse and criticism. It is impossible for me, as somebody who represents 300,000 square kilometers of northwestern BC, to suggest that the imminent threat of supertankers bigger than the Empire State Building plowing some of the most difficult waters to plow does not have implicit threat to the people I represent. That when I visit the communities of Hartley Bay, Bella Coola, Metlakatla, and Loch Willam's, the connection people have to the ocean environment is second to none. And may be in fact difficult for some Canadians to understand that don't live in such communities. Before even a shovel has hit the ground, the impacts have been felt. I understand you don't want that kind of testimony today. You want something more implicit to the proposed actual building of the pipeline. But if something starts off so badly, at a human level, at a community level, how can we expect it to turn out well in the end? I met with a company, one of the leading companies globally, who deals with spills from tankers. It was the best of the best. I asked them for what the recovery rate was considered a success on a marine accident. I was told that in ideal conditions, anywhere approaching 10% recovery of the total spill was considered successful. I have lived by these waters. I represent the people who depend on these waters. That knowledge and the potential impacts of a spill within the marine environment and the inability to clean those up is a personal experience and a knowledge. We cannot forbade the idea that we have to have actually sat in an oil spill in order to comment on what the effects are going to be to the coastal environment here. We have knowledge at our hands in terms of what these impacts can be. The communities I represent are deeply concerned about this. My experience with them has been, in the past, when there have been accidents, the Queen of the North, for example, that the promises that have been made by both government and the private sector alike are only made when the cameras are rolling. But when the attention disappears, the cleanup isn't there. The evidence that I have is that, in fact, this process suffers under a certain amount of intimidation from the Prime Minister of this country. Let me allow this. I wasn't born here. I was born in Ontario, and I chose to live here. I can remember coming off the ferry here in Prince Rupert, the beat up 86 Tercel, and driving across the Northwest to what I thought was an 8-month experience to do a contract in Smithers, BC. I had no expectations that this would become my home. I had no expectations that this would become my family. I think the experience that I had driving across the north that day, it was a beautiful morning, going over the rivers and by the lakes and seeing the mountains. The most clear thought I had that day was, if we mess this up, there's not much hope for us, because everything's here. I've lived around the world. I've worked in countries that do not have the fortune that we have. You'll spend some time looking at this project. Maybe it seems like a long time to you, but it's very short for us. And you'll move on and you'll do other things. I hope you're impacted, as I have been, by the people. Because I know we're supposed to talk about the rivers and the oceans and the trees, and all those things are important. But it's the people that I think of when I'm here today. And when I'm in the feast hall and we celebrate culture, we celebrate the bounty of this land, we celebrate coming together and forming nation. And I think, what wealth we have, and how generous people are here in sharing that wealth. Thank you for your time.